Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming out on a beautiful fall night for our first event of the fall season. And first of all, I want to thank the Institute staff who's done such a great job in pulling this event together, particularly to Jordy Justice and Carrie Day, who really jumped into action and got the public relations machine cranking. So thank them very much. It's good to have a guest speaker who we can tap into her star quality. So that was a good thing to work on. I want to say just a word about our fall agenda, just to give you a little bit of an overview of what we're going to try to accomplish. And what we're trying to do is bring together some interesting and compelling voices, but we also want to connect them to some of the big themes that we're trying to work on at the Institute. And the two that we're most interested in right now is the need for high-level leadership, both in Washington and Springfield, what we call statesmanship. And the second thing is to just look at the state of Illinois in its bicentennial year and sort of take stock of where we are, and particularly to think to the future about what can be done to renew and to revitalize the state. One initiative that we're just starting to develop, which you'll hear more of, is a summit we're hoping to organize in the spring, in which we're going to invite students from Illinois universities to come to campus and discuss ways to renew and to revitalize Illinois, which I think will be a really important project. So you'll be hearing more about that. But of course, in order to renew and revitalize your state, you need to kind of know where you've come from and what basis you're working from. And there's probably no better way to start that than to bring Pam Smoot before us and to just give us a little sketch about Illinois history. Dr. Smoot, as you may know, is a kind of iconic figure on SIU's campus. As I was reading student evaluations, it seems like everyone has to use the term tough love in describing her, and tough in the sense of being challenging and demanding, but also very affirming and very supportive of students. In fact, I was reading one review from a student from France who said something to the effect that she'd like to steal her and bring her back to France. So we're not sure if Dr. Smoot will be taken in by the allure of Paris and cafes and villas in the south of France, but hopefully we'll keep her in Carbondale. And one thing I should say is this fall she's teaching a course on Illinois history. So with that, I'd like to invite Pam to come forward and to give us a talk. So thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I wasn't expecting so many people, but I'm glad you're here. Otherwise, I'd have felt really bad. Okay. All right. My task this afternoon is to speak to you about surprising heroes and inspiring voices. So we're going to talk about heroes. So how do we define heroes? Do they have celebrity status, or are they just everyday people who have had a positive impact on someone else's life? Or is it that they simply made a difference, no matter how small? With that being said, heroes come in all shapes, all sizes, races, and ethnicities. They can be young, they can be old, and even in between. Homeless, rich, poor, and sometimes completely unassuming. Heroes come from all walks of life. Then there are those persons who simply must let everybody know about their heroic deeds with constant reminders. The Illinois heroes I bring to you today are not the latter, but those whose deeds have left an indelible mark on people's lives across the nation and across the oceans. Since the turn of the century, the progressive era brought about many changes in the quality of life. Not all businessmen during this period were robber barons like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. Nonetheless, they were shrewd businessmen. Paul Harris was born in Racine, Wisconsin in 1868 and had a checkered childhood, but managed to rise above his challenges. I have never heard of anybody cutting class in elementary school. That's what he did. He looks really innocent, doesn't he? Not only that, but he was expelled from 2 schools, Black River Academy and the University of Vermont in 1866. His grandparents provided him with a tutor in 1887, and a year later he entered Princeton University and remained there for only a year. He apprenticed at a law firm in Iowa and subsequently enrolled in the University of Iowa's law school. After earning his law degree in 1891, he migrated to Chicago and opened up his private practice. Most of the businessmen at this time who were in Chicago migrated from very small towns. Recognizing this, Harris decided to invite his friends and business associates to lunch with hopes of creating an organization for the city's professionals. From this lunch meeting, the Rotary Club was born on February 3rd, 1905. Harris was convinced that the club could be transformed into a service movement. And I quote, "He often wondered what caused people to do good things while describing how Chicago in 1905 was ripe for the kind of change Rotary could offer." Purposes of the Rotary Club were local and international service projects and to provide humanitarian service, goodwill, and peace around the world. Harris served in several leadership positions within the Rotary as president in 1907 through 1908. Under his leadership, he formed the Ways and Means Committee, expanding the club in several U.S. cities despite objections from his comrades, formed an executive board of directors and a national association. And for all of the people in this room, especially those of you from Chicago, I will have you know that the Rotary's first service project was a construction of public toilets in Chicago. The hero in Paul Harris lies in a multitude of heroics. In the United States, the Rotary Club had a dictionary project donating more than 2,000 dictionaries to Chicago public school third graders, rehab services for children with physical disabilities, provided mammogram examinations and information about breast cancer awareness to women residing in economically depressed areas. The Rotary's 109-year-old Job 1 prepares 250 Chicago high school students for the workplace through job training and summer internships with local businesses and nonprofit organizations. Upon the successful completion of the internship program, the students are eligible for a $2,500 scholarship and mentorship by a member of the Rotary Club. It provides employment opportunities for ex-convicts. They participate in the Easter Seals holiday party, providing a holiday celebration for children with autism and their parents. Across the water, the Rotary Club initiated a Polo Plus program in 1985 that has contributed more than $1.7 billion to immunize more than 2.5 billion children in 122 countries and spent $400 million to purchase the polio vaccine and recruited thousands of volunteers to promote the immunization campaigns. In Haiti, Water Wells and Goats program, $25,000. Ecuador, they had a program called Cause for Change, which was dental care. In Peru, school supplies and computers. Paul said that the Rotary history would be written again and again. Today, the Rotary Club has grown from 4 members to 1.2 members and expanded from Chicago to the east and to the west and to Europe. The Rotary Club became the National Rotary Association and an international association of Rotary Clubs. Paul Harris's vision of a service organization was nothing but heroic status as it has continued to change the quality of billions of lives at home and abroad. If we want to listen to the voice of Paul Percy Harris, we will hear him say, "This is a changing world. We must be prepared to change with it." The story, again, of the Rotary Club will be written again and again. Okay, let me see here. What year is this computer? Okay, these are the other 3 guys that, along with Paul Paul Harris wanted to share his vision, okay? All right, the next person I would like to talk about is Charles Neville. The modern civil rights movement was a watershed in American history. African Americans had become fed up with being treated as second-class citizens, living in the face of racial discrimination and segregation in every aspect of their lives, all because of their skin color. Plagued by low wages, menial positions, lack of employment opportunities, poor living conditions, restrictive covenants, and little or no opportunity for advancement, it was time to mobilize and take the movement for the black civil rights to the streets. The movement, which had its roots in the South, began with the Women's Political Council, the first group to call for a boycott of Montgomery, Alabama's local transit system. After a year of a successful boycott, the movement for black civil rights spread across the South and with participation from Northerners. Charles Neville of Cairo, he was actually born in Tennessee, was a student at SIU, and he came here on a music scholarship. His participation in the movement was triggered by the murder of 14-year-old Emmett Till. Noticing the differentiation his school's funding and those of his white peers, and watching Dr. Martin Luther King on television, he recognized his calling to be part of the movement. Neville left school after being recruited by SNCC and was one of the founders of the Freedom Singers. The Freedom Singers were a musical group primarily active between 1962 and 1966, singing freedom songs in order to fundraise and organize on behalf of SNCC, which is the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. In Neville's own words, he said, "We wanted to be motivators, not singers or entertainers, and to organize through song. The spirit of the movement was through song," end quote. They used it to raise money, to recruit people for the movement, and to spread the message to northern states. They performed as many as 3 concerts per day. Charles Neville was a songwriter, and one of his songs was, if you miss me from the back of the bus, and I'm going to give you a couple lyrics from there. If you miss me from the back of the bus and you can't find me nowhere, come on up to the front of the bus. I'll be riding up there. If you miss me from Jackson State and you can't find me nowhere, come over to Ole Miss. I'll be studying over there. If you miss me from the cotton fields and you can't find me nowhere, come on down to the courthouse. I'll be voting there. If you miss me from the thrifty drugstore and you can't find me nowhere, come over to Woolworth's, because I'll be sitting in there. If you miss me from the picket line and you can't find me nowhere, come on down to the jailhouse. I'll be rooming down there. If you miss me from the back of the bus and you can't find me nowhere, come on up to the driver's seat. I'll be driving up there. He wrote the lyrics to that song, but he was the bass person and the bass singer in the Freedom Singers. Okay, here we go again. I'm not hitting the right spot. Somebody needs to pay some more tuition so we can get some better equipment around here. That one, okay. Okay. All right.
Do you want to skip it to slide 4? You skipped that one.
Go ahead. Okay. This is Charles Neville right here. Okay, former SIU student. All right, now, confronted with violent opposition while traveling through the South, Neville was arrested 27 times in Georgia, Mississippi, and Missouri. And in one stint, he spent 42 days in Mississippi's Parchment Prison on a charge of criminal anarchy. Now, from what I understand, this law dates back to the Civil War, and it's a different kind of treason that is punishable by death. While there, he endured inhabitable conditions, extreme heat, spoiled food, working on the chain gang, and beatings from the prison guards, who attempted to frighten him and his comrades, into ending their protests by showing them the electric chair. Why is he a hero? He helped coordinate protests and voter registration drives and left us the music of a tumultuous era. He uses his civil rights experience today to teach young children about the struggles and survival of African Americans by reflecting on the past. At one time, I think this was a few years ago, Pam Hackbart Dean, we tried to bring James Orange here for Black History Month, and he would not call me back, only to find out that he had died. But anyway, he did. He didn't call back, and I kept wondering, you know, usually people call me back. He didn't call back. But anyway, that was why. But anyway, he had written a song called Governor Wallace. It was about Governor Wallace, and Nesbitt was the lead singer on that particular song. Okay, let me see if I can get this music going. Carrie. I told you, I should have brought my own computer over here. I have new stuff. Okay, and this one song that you're gonna hear, or try to hear anyway, he's just doing the bass part, but you know, the song moved me, and it moved a bunch of other people too. Listen to the Freedom Singers, you know, because you can really feel the spirit. Can you all hear it? Can you all hear? If not, I'll just.
When I ride in front of the bus, and I sit at money counter. We had water fountains that had white on one fountain and colored on another. We pretty much passed that, but people parties in our kind of thing. We broke down the Arctic legal system to it, but it's kind of hard to make people stay.
Is that better? Need to be up some more.
Whoa, we are soldiers in the army, and we got to fight. Oh, yes, we are. We got to hold. We got to hold. We are soldiers in the army, and we got to fight. We got to fight. Oh, yes, we are. We gotta hold. We got to hold. We got to hold it up until we die. Oh well, now Martin, he was a soldier. Oh yeah. He had his hands on the freedom line. Oh yeah. He spent half of his life fighting for freedom, but he just stood there more anyhow. Oh, we are soldiers. And we got to fight. We got to fight. Oh, yes, we are. We got to hold. We got to hold. We got to hold it up until we die. Oh, well, Mandela, he is a soldier. Oh, yeah. He's got his hands on the freedom flag. Oh, yeah. He spent half of his life in prison, but he just stood there for anyhow. Oh, we are soldiers in the army, and we got to fight. We got to fight. Oh, yes, we have. We got to hold. We got to hold. We got to hold it up. Oh, well, I'm glad that we are soldiers. Oh, yeah. We got our hands on the freedom flag. Oh, yeah. We'll spend half of our lives fighting for freedom, but we'll just stand here and fight anyhow. Oh, we are soldiers in the army, and we got to fight. We got to fight. Oh, yes, we have. We got to hold. We got to hold. We got to hold. I'll hold it up. We got to hold. I'll hold it up. We got to hold. I'll hold it up. We got to hold. Hold it up. We got to hold it. Tell your mother. We got to hold. They gotta hold it up. Hold it. Tell your mother. We got to hold. They gotta hold it up. Tell everybody. We got to hold. They gotta hold it up. Hold it, hold it up. We got to hold it, hold it up. We got to hold it. We gotta hold it up. We got to hold it up until we die.
Did you all feel that?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That's good. That was Charles doing the bass part of the song. All right. Now I would like to talk to you about Mary Harris Jones. Mary was a native of Ireland and the daughter of tenant farmers. She migrated with her family immigrated with her family to Canada to escape the potato famine where millions of people were starving and dying. She managed to obtain an education in Toronto where the tuition was free. In 1859, she moved to the United States at age 23 and became a teacher at a convent, which she found extremely boring. Seeking greener pastures, she went to Chicago to open a dress shop. And then when tragedy struck, she buried her husband and 4 children as a result of yellow fever. That was Memphis, excuse me. She went back to Chicago. Then the Progressive Era was a period of economic growth and resulting from increasing industrial production and population. The robber barons again sought to exploit workers, and unionism was on the rise. The American Federation of Labor represented white, male, and native-born workers. Hard luck. Chicago dress shop was destroyed by the Great Fire in 1871, so she sort of turned to unionism. She started organizing with the Knights of Labor in the 1880s, which was the first union activity associated with the railroad strike of 1877 and the labor movement in Chicago. She tried to organize skilled and unskilled workers, including men, women, whites, blacks, but they excluded Asians. It faltered after the Haymarket riot in 1886 in Chicago when a bomb was thrown into the crowd, killing a police officer and some strikers. A strike against McCormick's because of a wage reduction. Employers used propaganda to dissuade unionism as dangerous and un-American. Mary joined the United Mine Workers and urged striking workers to stay the course, although strike breakers and the militia had been dispatched. She looks really nice over here on my far right, your left. She looks really like a nice lady, but she was a piece of work. Okay. In 1901, she was summoned by John Mitchell, who was president of the United Mine Workers during the strike in Pennsylvania's silk mills. Females employed there were under the age of 16, and they were working like adults, so they wanted to be paid like adults. So, why is she important? She organized a children's crusade on behalf of children working in the mines and mills. She marched those kids from Philadelphia to New York to see Teddy Roosevelt with banners like, "We want to go to school, not the mines." She sacrificed her life and freedom by being jailed at least twice in West Virginia during the Paint Creek, Cabin Creek strike of 1912 for violating martial law. She was accused of conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 20 years in prison. They just gave her some days, though, okay? She was successfully sued for libel to the tune of $350,000 for inciting people to rebel, libel, and slander by a guy named Charles Albert. Because of the courage of her convictions, after completing her jail sentence, she was kicked completely out of Colorado for organizing a coal miner strike in 1914. Hero status. She was an advocate against oppression, had vested interest in well-being of women and children. She was adamantly opposed to children working because they often were maimed, overworked, tired, dirty, and hungry. She was deemed as the most dangerous woman in America. She was, okay? Now you see this middle picture right here, right? Now the prosecutor says, she's the most dangerous woman in America. And then he says she comes into a state and points her crooked finger, and 20,000 contented men lay down their tools and walk out. Now, if we were to listen to her voice, this is what she would say. This is a quote. "I live in the United States, but I don't know exactly where. My address is wherever there is a fight against oppression," end quote. Whew, Mary. Okay, this is this slide right here. This is where the children were marching, and it says, we only ask justice, we want to go to school. Oh, this equipment is working a whole lot better now. Okay, there's my friend Ida B. Wells. I love Ida. She's my hero, my shero, a few other things. Okay. Now, there are a bunch of stories associated with Ida B. Wells. You know, she and Booker T. Washington just despised each other, and he often referred to her as a bull in a china shop. That was not fair, all right? Anyway, Ida B. Wells was the founder of the Alpha Suffrage Club. She had all those titles right there. She was originally from Memphis, and after her friends were lynched, she migrated to Chicago. All right, now, in 1913, she founded the Alpha Suffrage Club, which is the same year that Illinois gave women partial suffrage. In other words, they could legally vote in local and national elections, but were prohibited from doing so in state elections. The purpose of this well-organized club was to uplift black women by obtaining the power of the vote and allowing them participation in the decision-making process. Wells used several strategies to obtain her goals. They held weekly meetings to educate women on political issues, hosted candidates for local offices such as judges, canvassed primarily black neighborhoods to register voters, published a newsletter called the Alpha Suffrage Record, giving a voice to African Americans, organizing once-a-week meeting sessions as learning centers on the rights and duties of citizens. But Wells was confronted with criticism from both white women suffragists and black men. In 1913, for example, the National American Woman Suffrage Association sponsored and organized a major women's suffrage parade in Washington, D.C. But in order to garner the support of Southern white women, black women were not to march with their state delegations. As an alternative to their participation in the parade, they were relegated to bring up the rear of the parade. In other words, they had to go to the back of the parade. Wells attended the parade on behalf of the Alpha Suffrage Club, and they actually raised funds to send her to Washington, D.C. And she met with the Illinois delegation, whom she was supposed to join in the parade with. All right, but the NAWSA was pressed to maintain an all-white delegation, and they told Wells she had to go to the end. Well, this is what she says, and I quote, "If I were a colored woman, I would be willing to march with the other women of my race," Wells replied. "Either I go with you or not at all. I am not taking this stand because I personally wish for recognition. I'm doing it for the future benefit of my whole race." Wells then stood on the sidewalk, and when the Illinois contingent went by, she just jumped in there and started marching with them. That was Ida. While Wells and club members canvassed black neighborhoods to register black women to vote, they were taunted by you-know-who. They were taunted by black men, and what they said was, "You all are trying to take the place of men and wear trousers." That was not the case. So the Alpha Suffrage Club went on about its business, ignoring those who resented their efforts to register voters and to challenge the idea that a woman's place was in the home. Okay, now, this photograph right here, this is Ida B. Wells and her children. Now, those white women suffragettes like Susan B. Anthony and Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, they told her that she could not do the work of women and be married and have children. She proved them wrong. She did. They were dead wrong. All right, now, these women did a lot of work, all right? So, her courage and persistence paid off in 1915. Now, they went out here and they registered like 3,000 black women to vote, all right? So, Oscar DePriest was elected in 1914 as the first black alderman in Chicago. And he won by a large margin. And how do you think that happened? It was the women. All right, so black women played a decisive role in his election, with over a third of the votes coming from women. Now, the priest would have likely lost, that's the word on the street. And one thing about him, he acknowledged the importance of their contribution, and he stated, "I am more than thankful for their work as electors. I believe they have every necessary qualification that men possess," end quote. Wells was fearless in everything she did. Her work made a real difference for the success of black politicians in Chicago because more blacks began to run for political offices, and they actually sought out the Alpha Suffrage Club to help them in their campaigns. Why is she a hero? Like I said, she and the Alpha Suffrage Club registered 3,000 women to vote in Chicago's 2nd Ward. She was fearless, she was defiant, she was militant, she was determined, and she was courageous. She made a difference in the lives of African American women, local politics, challenged the political thought of black men. She brought to the forefront the challenges associated with the right of women to vote and political awareness. Her leadership and protests were significant in the passage of the 19th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, giving the right of women to vote. She had the ability to mobilize the people. She organized one of the most important female suffrage organizations in the state and the city. And she also, along with the Alpha Suffrage Club, endorsed a multitude of candidates. If we were to listen to her voice and be inspired, this is what she would say, and I quote, "One had better be fighting against injustice than to die like a dog or a rat in a trap," end quote. But given today's pressure, let's just talk about the media, attacking the media, all right? I'd have said this a long, long time ago, and how important the media is. This is what she says. "The people must know before they can act, and there is no educator to come with the press." Okay? All right, those are the members of the Alpha Suffrage Club, you see? Okay, that's Ida in the middle. What's that? Look at Madam C.J. Walker. This looks like Mary McLeod Bethune and people over there, okay. All right, this is a sample ballot that they passed out, distributed in the neighborhoods so that the women would know what the ballots look like. And the men too. Yeah, okay, no male bashing. But anyway, this is just a newspaper clipping here that just talks about how the Alpha Suffrage Club was having an entertainment, as they called it, to raise funds to send Ida B. Wells to Washington, D.C. and pay all of her expenses. All right, this is Oscar DePriest, the first black alderman in Chicago who later became a U.S. congressman. Okay. You all know her? Yeah. You all know her? Well, why don't you all tell the story? The Duchess was a piece of work too. Okay. Uh-oh. Her father said bad things about her when she was born. I couldn't believe he would talk about his daughter like that. Oh my goodness. Yeah, he said she looked like a skinned squirrel or something on that order when she was born. But, you know, she was a little premature, all right? So, journalism was like most professions. Either there were few or no women in this occupation, and survival was sometimes difficult whenever a woman during the early 20th century worked outside the home. Virginia was an exception, and you already know that, right? When she was born in Carbondale on June 21st, 1918, her father made such terrible comments about her appearance, describing her as a 3.5-pound scrap of the scrapper-to-be, looked like a skinned squirrel. She turned out pretty good, didn't she? However, she recovered as well as you can see, okay? Her family migrated to Chicago where her father had accepted a promotion in the Illinois Central Railroad, and her parents sent her to Ursuline Academy in St. Louis, which is an all-girls private Catholic school, where she became an excellent writer. Her teachers, recognizing her talent for writing, coached her with hopes of her steering her toward a professional career. After graduation, she studied journalism at the University of Iowa and was content on becoming a newspaper reporter. And then she met this man, Harold Greer, whose family owned a newspaper in Herrin. She dropped out of school and worked at his family's newspaper. And she married him, but then, you know, it was short-lived. And then she went to Chicago for a fresh start. So she was hired by the Chicago Sun, and it was more exciting than working at the Herrin Daily Journal. No offense to the paper if it's still here, okay? Where she was stuck in writing articles about gardening, gambling, selling advertisement, and sweeping floors. I'm sure that was beneath her. This was definitely not her idea of what it meant to be a newspaper reporter. Her skills as a reporter earned her the nickname the Duchess. Her career as a journalist flourished as she was given a wide range of stories on which to report. They were a far cry from those of her previous employer. Crime and corruption became her forte. In 1943, she had established quite a reputation among her male colleagues with an opportunity to cover murder cases and those about the rich and famous and then those not so famous. Once she even took her spiked high heel and hit a gangster with it and lived to tell about it. She left the Sun, which merged with the Times, and went to the Tribune because they were going to pay her more money. She later had a radio broadcast called Coffee with the Duchess, and then she even ended up on TV. So her heroism, her successful 35-year journalism career paved the way for women reporters to work outside what was considered the woman's sphere and to take control of her destiny. She was the first woman in the Chicago Sun's editorial staff, the first woman in Chicago with a sports byline, the first woman named Press Veteran of the Year by the Chicago Press Veterans Association. She was inducted into the Journalism Hall of Fame. And for the ladies in this room, she was instrumental in the Sun's installing the city's first restroom for ladies, so they didn't have to walk up 2 flights of stairs to use the Society reporters' facilities. She never forgot where she came from and returned to Southern Illinois after leaving the Tribune. She did. She even took care of SIU. Made a few donations here and there. All right, and the students over at Carbondale Community High School, you know, every year there's History Day. It's you know, all the high school, not all of them, but a lot of the high schools participate, and then the winners, they get a chance to go to the state championship in Springfield, and if they do well there, then they go to the national championship in Washington, D.C.
And they did.
Yeah, they did.
Yes.
Miss Brown does a great job with those kids. All right, this is Ann Heistad. Doesn't she look lovely? I think she does. I like a little hat. Got a little nursing hat on. All right, she's from Norway, and her family immigrated to Wisconsin in 1871 when she was only 4 years old. You know, they say it were for reasons unknown. She left and went to Chicago when she was 16, but there were 9 other children in the family, so that might be why she tried to get away. Just maybe. So she worked as a seamstress in the garment district. While there, she felt a sense of worth. In other words, she figured she could be doing more with her life than being confined in a room filled with other women just sewing. So she enrolled in the nurse training program at Augustana Hospital, which was built by an ever-increasing Swedish immigrant population. It was founded in 1884 by the Swedish Lutheran Synod. Upon graduation, she began her nursing career as a traveling nurse. Similar to Jane Addams, she went to poverty-stricken neighborhoods where she provided free medical care for its inhabitants. In 1911, Anna worked as a dispensary nurse at the Marcy Center, and 7 years later, she became its director. That's the Marcy Center. The center provided a wide range of social services such as medical care, child care, citizenship classes, and Bible study. Leaving a well-trained cadre of social workers, she had been under the tutelage of, they had been under her tutelage, and she retired in 1939, but continued to do the work for which she was called and on a voluntary basis. Her heroism. During the Progressive era or the Reform era, we often hear of the same names, the same people all the time who changed the quality of life for people in Chicago, especially Jane Addams with the Hull House. Anna's heroism lies in the fact that she too made a difference in the lives of people. She assisted Jewish refugees who fled Nazi Germany, made it a point to find them decent housing, sought employment opportunities for those persons without jobs or to find better paying jobs. Her kindness also allowed her to lend money to people who were struggling. All right, this is in one of those immigrant neighborhoods where she, everybody knew her based on what I read. If you just called her name, it's like calling mine. Everybody knows who I am, right? Okay, so anyway, but that's her in the middle with the fancy hat on. You all know who that is, right? He's one of my heroes. That's Harold Washington. You all know that? All right, now, I'm for the first time, I'm teaching an Illinois history class, and I have learned so much. And one of the things that I learned is that Chicago politics have been corrupt long before those 6 governors were charged with crimes, and 4 of them having been convicted. Yeah. That stuff they were doing. Anyway, but this does not mean that all of the local or state politicians are corrupt. Harold Washington, a native of Chicago, graduated from DuSable High School, Roosevelt College, and Northwestern University's law school. He subsequently went into private practice in Chicago. His ambitions were clear. He was destined to be a politician. He held several elective offices, including, but not limited to, an assistant city prosecutor, a precinct captain, an Illinois state legislator and senator, and a U.S. congressman. Washington was Chicago's first black mayor, and he was elected in 1983 and re-elected in 1987. During his terms in office, he sought to bring the city together in a number of ways. He filled positions with underrepresented groups and provided an opportunity for them to obtain city contracts. He tackled the issue of redistricting to diversify city government. Washington created a plan to tout the city's cultural values in preparation of the city's budget, allowed the public to participate. Heroism. Harold brought about a cohesiveness signaling inclusion, which had not been heard of in Chicago in a long time. He defeated 5 Democratic challengers in a race that some people said could not have been done. Harold Washington himself left a legacy of inspiration, and in his voice, he stated, "Business as usual will not be accepted in this city." There's Harold, and this is the library that was created in the Chicago Loop to make it beautiful. I've been in there. It is beautiful in there. It's even more beautiful than our library. Yeah, I knew I'd get you over there. It's okay. All right. All right, let's see here. We know who this is. She is one of my sheroes for real. All right, Latinas are making their way in the United States, and Susana Mendoza is a case in point. Her family migrated from Mexico when she was about 12 years old, and she was a graduate of Truman University, and she was on a soccer and academic scholarship. Her strides have been made in politics, a place where change can occur. And at age 28, she showed great promise for the future by being elected as an Illinois state representative. Not only was this a historic feat, but she was also the youngest member of the 92nd Illinois General Assembly. She was appointed to several important legislative committees and was chair of the International Trade and Commerce Committee, Labor, Public Utilities, and Railroad Industry Committees. She is a former co-chair of the first Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus, and she was elected comptroller after serving the remaining term of the late Judy Parr Topinka. Her heroism is something else, and it just makes me feel really great. She paved the way for Latinas to run for political office, but not just that. All right, she stood up to the former governor, 2 times removed, for making false accusations regarding pay and having blamed her for the failure of his capital bill. Her stellar reputation expands across the oceans: China, El Salvador, Uganda, Tanzania, and Brazil. She was the first woman elected city clerk in Chicago, then Chicago city clerk, managing a budget of more than $100 million. She beat up the puppy mill industry, and she sought in a number of ways to reduce fraud. Her ability to make hard decisions makes her a hero. When dealing with the state's budget woes during the stalemate, she created a video that had over 2 million hits explaining the devastation that not passing the budget would cause. I loved her Facebook page, all right? But anyway, Susana, she's a hero in her own right, and she's an example and an inspiration to Latina students and other women as well, and probably some of the guys too. Okay, but anyway, and this past year was the first time that we've had a Latina student accept the fellowship to go to, it was a Latina Heritage Fellowship, and they go to Springfield for a spring semester, and they work with legislators for that entire semester, and Dr. Baker over there supervises them. All right, I have one more person on here, and I need somebody to tell me who that is. Where are my history majors? I've been learning all about Black Hawk. Now, we have heard people say that heroes don't get captured, but he got captured, but I thought he was a hero. Where are my history majors? I know there's some in here somewhere. Oh, now I'm calling on people, so now they want to hide. All right, Black Hawk is my hero. He's one of my heroes simply because he stood up to the settlers who were violating the Northwest Ordinance and were forcing his people off the land, and had folks signing these treaties, giving up millions of acres of land. And he said, no, that's not going to happen. We're not going to abide by this treaty. And then there were these wars. There were all sorts of things going on. But Black Hawk continued to fight for his people, for his tribe, regardless of what happened. He eventually did get captured, but it was not for naught. It was not all for naught. All right, he was on a mission, and he is a hero because of what he did to ensure that his people survived. I mean, he lost a lot along the way, but he did what he needed to do, and I thought that was really great. Now I have one more person, Joseph H. Barker, but I could not find a picture of him. I guess I'm not on my job or something. I worked really hard, I did. Okay. I searched high and I searched low, and nothing happened. Okay, so y'all just bear with me 1 second. I just saw him a minute ago. Oh, there he is. Okay, Joseph H. Barquette. He was a mulatto who was born free to mixed parents in South Carolina, and a skilled brick mason and husband and father of 3. He migrated to Galesburg, Illinois, and became a well-respected citizen among whites and the spokesperson for the Black community. His heroism lies in 3 areas: in the military, politics, civil rights, and education. He answered the call of Frederick Douglass for the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry at age 40. He survived the battle, but he was honored that he was even asked and considered. But anyway, he survived the Battle of Fort Wagner, and after a brief stint in South Carolina, he returned to Galesburg as a master sergeant. On April 21st, 1870, he was one of the speakers at the colored ratification meeting celebrating the passage of the 15th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, giving former slaves the right to vote. Realizing its importance of that right, he was instrumental in creating a block of black voters to the tune of about 310. And he established the Equal Rights League. 2 years later, this group of black voters actively participated in the electoral process by selecting a slate of candidates for local offices. Politics aside, Barquette was adamant about education for black children. He successfully went to the school board in 1863 with a proposal for the black community to locate a building for a school to educate their children and pay for it, if the board would furnish the teacher and assume responsibility for the supplies. He was successful in his efforts, but his activism went a step further. In 1871, he began to agitate for the desegregation of schools. When his request was made, he was rebuked by the Board of Education. Refusing to accept its decision, Barquette and the black community made it clear that they would raise $200 to hire legal representation to test the question as to admission of their children into public schools. Their lawyer, Edwin Hatch Leach, informed the board that they would be liable for $1,000 each if the black children were refused admission to the public schools. It was not until October of the following year that any movement on the matter occurred. The Board of Education agreed, and I quote, "The children of colored citizens are to receive equally the white children the benefits of a common education," with the white children, the benefits of a common education. 2 years elapsed before black children were admitted to the public schools in Galesburg. An act of the Illinois General Assembly in 1874 forced that issue, because there were a couple of black schools there, and then folks started burning them down. But anyway, he persevered, and again, it took 2 years, but then it took the Illinois Act and the General Assembly to make this happen. Okay, I'm done. And I was wondering how much money I could collect after you all heard that song. If the movement were still going on, I'm sure we'd have done quite well. Mm-hmm. No.
I didn't realize there were any survivors at Fort Wagner.
Well, this guy, he was digging holes. He was digging ditches.
Oh,
okay. Mm-hmm. Yeah, we all saw glory. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, in relationship to that song, is there any collection of his music or that part of SNCC?
Yes. Okay. They have several albums, and you can just go online. They're there. And they cost, like, I think one of the albums is like $7.40 or something, CD, I'm sorry. But they have, yeah, their music is available.
Wonderful.
I mean, because I was just sitting there listening and just, all engulfed in it.
Where is Charles Nesbitt now?
Charles Nesbitt is in Russellville, Kentucky. He's the first black magistrate there, and he has a research project going on trying to teach young children how to trace their families who have been in the military, and then he talks to them, about the struggles during the civil rights movement and reflects on that so that they can understand why they're able to go to schools with white children and why they can sit in the restaurants and so on and so forth. Ooh, I can sit down now.
Yes. No.
Would you say something about the role of SIU in the education, the higher education of the Little Rock 7?
The Little Rock 9. Okay, there was Little Rock 9 at Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. 3 of the students who were part of the Little Rock 9 were students at SIU Carbondale. That was Minnie Jean Brown, Terrence Roberts, and Thelma Mothershed Ware. They're all still living. Terrence has a PhD, he's a psychologist. Mothershed Ware, I don't know what she's doing right now, but Minnie Jean Brown, Tricky, is still on the lecture circuit. Did I answer your question? Okay. Nothing from the library? Hi.
In the one of the pieces of Eyes on the Prize, Fannie Lou Hamer.
Oh, hey, Walter.
Chuck Neville appears in the background singing. And
Yeah.
a lot of people may know his sister, J.C. Simon.
Okay, because then the other thing about Charles Neville, he talked about, going to meetings at Fannie Lou Hamer's house, and he talked about, he didn't realize how serious the movement was. That was before he went to jail, right? But anyway, how serious the movement was until he went to her house and saw the bullet holes in the wall. All right, because they were doing drive-bys on Fannie Lou Hamer's house. And, they sent her a water bill that was $9,000 in a house that had no running water. Yes. Barquet. You're welcome. Now I feel like Aquila in the B, but it's okay. Am I done? Okay, well, thank you all for coming. Thank you. You can eat some more pizza.
Well, Dr. Smoot, thank you very much
Welcome.
for a wonderful presentation and a great way to kick off our fall overview of Illinois history. So thank you very much. I was just going to say next week we're going to have State Representative Will Davis, who's an SIU grad, who's going to give us a sort of current snapshot of what is happening in Illinois and what the state's challenges are. So please feel free to join us then. So thank you so much.